have more cases to discover.
Testing, yes. Yeah, I know the people are reconciled.
One
Please
good
go ahead, sir.
thing is that the rate of fatality is coming down. That's something very interesting.
Yes. Good, and the mortality rate is down. The number of people recovering also increased actually.
Yeah.
I only hope the hospital is not sending them away. You're okay, go home. If you give paracetamol, your temperature really comes down. But I think it's quite a challenge we have to handle, I suppose.
Vijay Kumar, you are sitting in the office, is it?
No, sir, it's a virtual background we have created. I'm sitting at home only.
Okay.
It's an office background which we have taken a picture and created just to create the atmosphere that we are talking.
The other day, I in a Zoom meeting, board meeting, I saw one of my directors behind him was the sea and the beach. So I asked him, how is it that he's there? But then he said it is only again a created scene there. That's all.
Yes. In fact, even your phone, I can create it actually. Sir. Maybe next time when you're free, you tell me. I'll send my executive, will come and create all that for you actually. A couple of options which you can keep changing based on your need actually.
I hope you cannot create election results this way. The real ones.
I think the natural background with the sea and sunshine, I think that will give a lot of hope to the people, not only about the elections, it's about the pandemic too.
Yeah, just put the ballot box to the beach and you have them all.
Hey Ashish, good to have you with us. I see Ashish and Simran join.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Rupi. How are you?
Hi, how are you? Welcome.
Good. Good evening.
Hi, Pankaj. Welcome, sir. Shankar, you can go on here. I'll start another minute because I'm going to tell about some MMA.
Everything's ready, sir. Social medias.
All on? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, Shankar, you go ahead. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Very warm welcome to another edition of our evening talk. I started almost 3 minutes before time. The objective of starting is because I thought I'll remind you about some of the MMA events which you have finalized for the month of June. And also we have sent you all the details in one single sheet so that you don't miss them along with the IDs we have sent it to you. Notwithstanding, I'll just quickly go through the next 1 minute so that if you have missed it in your inbox, you don't miss some of the outstanding event which you are planning to do. Today's event, you all know COVID-19, electoral reforms. A short while from now, I'll come to you that and introduce the speaker and also the distinguished speaker who is going to be talking to us, Mr. Peter Rimley. The others, what's happening on the 6th of Saturday, 6th of June, leadership and purpose in turbulent times. And we got one of the outstanding speaker today, international speaker, Nandu Nandkishore. He was a former head of Nestle in Switzerland and is also now professor of Indian School of Business and also a guest lecturer at London Business School. He's going to be talking to us on the very, very important subject. I have seen some of the preparations, what he has done, and it's an outstanding talk during the pandemic in turbulent times. I think all the corporates should not miss. It's not to be missed event. It's happening on the 6th of June. On Wednesday 10th, we have effective teamwork by Manu Vora, international speaker from USA. It's happening at 9 o'clock in the morning because he's calling from USA, Chicago, due to time, Indian Standard Time, 9 o'clock in the morning. On Friday the 12th, again, we have an excellent thing, grow spiritually to be a better manager. And we got Swami Muktananda. He is a former founder of the Guru Kripalu Yoga from Dallas, USA. He's a graduate of IIT Madras and also IIM Ahmedabad. And he has done some phenomenal work in the field of leadership. And he's a thought leader. And he does quite a number of work on leadership. So it's good to listen to him. Then on the Saturday the 13th, we have Leaders Speak on Masterclass, where we have again outstanding speaker, Tiger Tyagarajan, who is the president and CEO of Genpact. He is going to be talking to us, and also a Moon member of Catalyst. He is going to be talking to us on what is high performance culture and how do we drive it as a leader in this rapid changes. So it's good to listen to some of the world leaders who are going to be talking to us on this, and it's happening on 13th. And on the 17th, we have another interesting leader, because there's so much is happening on digitalization, and I think most of us know without digitalization we cannot survive in this pandemic. And we're going to again an outstanding speaker. He's going to be talking to us on the immune organizations. And the speak to us is Jasprit Brindra. He is a founder of Digital Matters, and he's a digital transformation leader, digital advisory, because he is going to be talking to us. We are talking about virus and immune to coronavirus. But what is the immune about organizing digital transformation? How we are going to really set up yourself to immune yourself from some of the digital issues what you have. So it's very interesting. Then again, a very interesting event on 18th of June, and where we have women in politics. We got four outstanding women politicians will be talking to us. Khushbu Sundar, who is a spokesperson for Indian National Congress, he accepted. We also invited Ms. Kanimodi and Dr. Hina Gavitt, both a member of parliament, young member of parliament, and also Rehana Hamir. She is the elected member from London Council. She has agreed to join us from London. This is happening on 18th. Then on the 20th, we have survival and recovery from the pandemic through Industry 4.0. And again, we have an outstanding speaker, Chandramouli, former managing director of Hecate, one of the leading companies, Star NAG, is going to be talking to us. Wednesday 24th, we have a leadership in excellence, again, in Manu Ora. And 27th, again, we have a financial and planning and management in COVID, the time of COVID times. And again, we have an outstanding speaker. Prasad is the former CEO of CAMS. You know, CAMS is the one who manages all your investments, and he was the former CEO. He's going to be talking to us. These are some of the events what I thought I must share with you. We meet in the inbox. Now, not on time, we'll start our event for this today. COVID-19 and electoral reform. It's always been our objective to bring it to you some interesting events for you, so that your thought get tickled to understand what's happening in today's time. And we have been happy and privileged to host you even continuously from the time lockdown was there. We have seen through your lockdown 1, 2, 3, 4. We are going to see through also all the unlockdown with what's happening, opening up. We'll continue to come to with the excellent program with the support of Conrad and Stifting. Now, public perception change as never before due to whatever is happening in present situation, and decision to impose lockdown, and also problem of migrant labor, loss of recreation of a job and family incomes, which has been greatly impacted at all levels. And all this is going to have a serious impact on voters. And voters now will dictate on the manifestos and also see that how the election has to be carried out in this time. And to talk about COVID-19 electoral reform, we have one of the outstanding leader who is very respected in the field of election reforms. Ladies and gentlemen, please, I'll have the privilege of warmly welcoming Mr. C.S. Krishnamurthy, former Chief Election Commissioner, India. Before I request Mr. Chief Election Commissioner to speak to us on the theme of today's electoral reforms, let me have the privilege of welcoming Mr. Peter Remle, who is the resident representative of India of Conrad and Stifting. He's been a great supporter of MMA. All members of MMA know how much MMA and CAS worked together for the last 30 years in promoting management movement and also entrepreneurial development program. Let me have the privilege of introducing Mr. Peter Remle before I request him to deliver the introductory remarks. Mr. Peter Remle is the current resident representative of Conrad and Stifting India. He is the first law degree and from Priceberg University. After working as a jurist, judge, and lecturer, he took public office, head of the division of the Ministry of State Ministry and the Interior in Saxony, Germany, from November 1991 until 2000. And he was also the advisor to the governance reforms of GIS, that is German International Cooperation, to the Ministry of Administration Reforms and Anti-Corruption Commissioner of the Republic of Indonesia, where he served over 7 years. He then moved to Rabada as a principal advisor of Good Governance and Justice Program. Earlier, he was also resident representative of Lebanon, director of Rule of Law Program, Middle East, Northeast Africa, Conrad and Stifting. And may I request Mr. Peter Rimmel to offer your introductory remarks. Over to you, Mr. Peter.
Yes, thank you, Group Captain. Mr. Krishnamurthy, ladies and gentlemen, well, it's always a pleasure to work with the MMA because we have one thing in common. MMA and myself, we share the same age. So electoral reform is a topic that is often relegated to the sidelines of political discourse. It's a topic best to statisticians or to psychologists. In the media, the question is far too often who won, and not how or by what margins did they win. Well, let me share today maybe a few specifics of the German electoral system and also some personal experience with electoral reform in there. So what are elections for in a representative democracy? It's basically to bring the will of the people, to make sure that the will of the people is represented in the parliament. But every country has its own political culture, and all political cultures demand fitting electoral systems. Broadly speaking, there are those cultures that value inclusion, consensus building, compromise, and those that value local and regional representation, majority rule, one-party governance. So it's basically two systems. It's proportionality on the one side versus the winner takes it all on the other side. Germany finds itself very much on a consensus end of the scale. Most English-speaking nations find themselves on the other end. The political culture of the Westminster system is often characterized by a much more adversarial relationship between the parties. Coalitions are a lot less common. India is therefore definitely not a typical Anglophone Westminster country. It might have more in common with the Bundestag, our federal parliament, than with the House of Commons, but we are yet to see a grand coalition in India. German state and federal parliament operate a mixed member proportional system. Approximately half of the members of parliament are elected in single member constituencies. The rest is reserved for party lists that are distributed proportionally, the other element, to top up the results for the constituency votes, to make the overall makeup of our assemblies proportional to the total of votes that have been casted. To give you an example, the last general election in 2017, the Christian Democratic Union, that's the party of Angela Merkel, won nearly 80% of all the constituencies. But in Germany, because their vote share was that high, it doesn't mean that the party system was totally overwhelming there. The party system was fractured, and all the other parties did even worse. But the overall vote share for the Christian Democrats was around 33% of the vote. So the slate of constituency MPs is now topped up to achieve state and countrywide proportionality between the parties. So our system combines the advantage of first past the post voting, a direct link between the local community and its directly elected representative, with those of proportional voting. So no vote is wasted, what happens in a winner takes it all system, and all countrywide ideologies are represented according to their respective strength. And this strength is, of course, changing over time. That's why we have repeated elections to countercheck. A second tenet, and maybe that is very different in India, what I represent for Germany now, of our party system concerns the finances. After the Second World War, the founders of modern Germany, and one of them was Konrad Adenauer, whose name we bear, made out of the weakness of German parties as one of the reasons for the demise of our First Republic. Accordingly, their role in the political process was inscribed in our new constitution in 1949. So we have an entire article dealing with the political parties. To accord them to the independence necessary to fulfill their constitutional role, the state takes a role in their financing. Not completely, but it contributes. State funding is granted according to election results and based on a minimum vote of share between, it's very low, 0.5 to 1%, depending on what election, if it's European, federal, or state elections. For every vote cast, a party receives a certain amount of money, capped at the amount of money the party was able to acquire via other means. The relative capping and a fixed sum for all parties together that is calculated each year, the absolute capping. I know it's very technical, but the difference is the state is participating in funding the parties based on electoral results. Donations are encouraged by our system, they are tax exempt, and as explained, they lead to a higher influx of state financing. The parliamentary factions associated with parties are also reimbursed to safeguard their ability to function independently of the executive or outside influence. Now comes something very specific, and you know that, a remarkable and a new feature of this system are our German political foundations, like our Konrad Adenauer Foundation. If political parties are returned to our parliament, the federal one, twice, then they are viewed as representing a durable political ideology, and they are thus eligible for having their own foundation, which are funded with federal public means. And this depends if activities are inside Europe, outside Europe. It's our Ministry of Development Cooperation or the Foreign Ministry who are funding the political foundations like us. That way, the German state encourages the establishment of strong political parties that represent broad ideologies, not so many different small parties, but broad ideologies. It discourages the existence of splintered political systems with multiple conservative or socialist or liberal parties, and instead encourages one party to represent one part of society. Not the one-party rule, but the different ideologies in sets. In fact, to discourage frequent fall of governments due political manipulation and loss of majority, there also exists what we call a constructive vote of non-confidence. So, in the constitution, if a party loses majority, another one can come in, or a coalition say, hey, we mistrust the chancellor, and we bring in this vote of non-confidence, but not just to bring down the government, but to replace it. And you need to prove that you have that majority. That's the instrument that we are not without government. So what does that German experience mean for India? Of course, I said, everything is based on culture. It is not transferable. Since the first German Republic was established in 1919, German political culture was based on consensus building and the accommodation of minority interests. So that background maybe is relevant for India too. So it's really is a matter of perception. And in our discourse, it is all about proportionality. Having elected constituency MPs is more or less an add-on. No one will ever ask what's the constituency of Chancellor Angela Merkel, because it's not so relevant, except in her own constituency. So considering the sheer size of India and their constituencies we have already, so compared to Germany, adopting those features might not be the best solution because they would even get bigger and unmanageable. They're already maybe too big now. But to add an element of proportionality, to have those consensus building minority interests considered, that might not be the worst idea. So let me share some of my experience in electoral reform. I was once representing our government in parliament and the legal draft of a change of the electoral law, but only referring to local government elections. I can tell you this was more a technocrat approach of facilitating procedures, making things easier for the voter. But the fight I have experienced in parliament among the political parties for small things, they were only measured not is it practical or not, only measured by does it serve my party, the interests, or does it serve the political opponent? Would we gain? Would they gain? This was the entire measurement. And so many technocrat suggestions were at the end abandoned because some political party feared it would lose or the other one would win too much or whatever. And I am looking forward to hear if Mr. Krishnamurthy made similar experiences with such motivations during his tenure in the electoral office when electoral reforms were discussed. So I'm looking forward to hear what is the Indian experience, what could be suggested, and of course also if those thoughts I had brought in, if some of those are an idea to be picked up or considered in the Indian discussion as well. I head back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peter, for sharing your German perspective. One thing we are happy to hear that German Parliament also fight as much as we do it in India, because that is the way the democracy works. And thank you. I think you set the tone for the discussion to come. And before I have the privilege of introducing our guest for this evening, Mr. Krishnamurthy, let me just remind our viewers, all those who are watching the program live on YouTube, Facebook, and also our live IBC, please share your questions. There's a band. The mobile number is flashed on the screen, so that all your questions I will put up to the guest today for them to respond as appropriate. And we also request all the people who have joined us on Zoom, kindly share your question in the chat mode, and that will be shared with the speaker and also whoever you address, so that they'll be happy to respond to your question. Now, let me have the privilege of, it's a great honor for me to introduce Mr. Krishnamurthy. Mr. Krishnamurthy started his career as an Indian Revenue Service officer. He served the government on various levels, including Secretary, Department of Company Affairs. He was the first Indian Revenue Officer to become the Secretary to the Government of India, as well as the Chief Election Commissioner of India. Mr. Krishnamurthy has joined Indian Revenue Service of 1963 batch, having served a number of ministries in New Delhi, including shipping and finance. He was deputed as a Deputy Director General of Hindustan Shipyard Limited, Visakhapatnam. One of his key jobs he has handled and was the Chief Commissioner of Income Tax in Mumbai. Mumbai, you know, almost the maximum revenue from the tax comes from Mumbai. It's the financial capital of India. Having served in Mumbai, you can do any, you will be able to handle the financial issues of any other state. He also served as an IMF advisor in Ethiopia and Georgia. As a Chief Election Commissioner, he was an observer to the elections in Zimbabwe and also US President's election in the year 2004. In 2005, Mr. Krishnamurthy was appointed by the Supreme Court of India to conduct election to the Board of Control of Cricket India, BCCI, in order to ensure that free and fair polls amidst a number of differences in factions and within the BCCI. Ladies and gentlemen, let me present you Mr. Krishnamurthy to talk to us on the important subject, COVID-19 electoral reform. Over to you, sir. Very warm welcome to you. Over to you, Mr. Krishnamurthy.
Thank you very much, Captain Vijay Kumar. First of all, let me thank Madras Management Association and its associates for inviting me to speak on this subject. The subject of democracy and electoral reforms has been discussed by so many people and so many media columnists and so on. Sometimes you feel frustrated whether it is worthwhile to talk about it again. But then Captain Vijay Kumar gave me a slight opportunity to say that there are electoral reforms relating to the present situation, namely the situation thrown up by COVID-19, as to how we can bring about some changes which may, in the long-term interest of democracy and constitutional democracy and parliamentary elections, it may be good for the country and for the world, perhaps. Democracy and is a very, very intellectually stimulating topic, but then it has so many shades of form, and then different countries have different variations. But I'm glad that Peter gave some highlights of the German system, which is to be appreciated, because there are a few things which we can certainly learn from the German experience. As far as imperfections in democracy are concerned, it is not the sole monopoly of one country. Almost all over the world, they have some problem or other, and I do not think any democracy can claim itself to be perfect. But there are particularly mature democracies like Germany, Australia, UK, and even to some extent United States of America. But they too have their own quota of problems. They are not able to really ensure effective performance of a democracy. But then they have the maturity to solve the problem by discussions and debates, and not by violence and hatred. That is some of the things which we should bear in mind. Now, do we need electoral reforms? Every country needs electoral reforms. It depends upon the situation in each country. But Asian and African countries need urgently these reforms, because we have been let off the colonial regime about a few decades back, and all of them are experimenting with various forms of democracy. In fact, there are a number of publications about electoral design and electoral commissions and management bodies and so on. But what I wish to cover today is what we can bring about some changes in electoral scenario here, placing in mind the complications thrown up by the COVID-19, because we have an election scheduled in November in Bihar, and we have a few more elections in next April, May, including Tamil Nadu. So we may have to prepare ourselves, because COVID-19 is not going to disappear overnight. It is going to be there for some time. But I will say it's an opportunity. The crisis throws an opportunity to bring about some reform, which may be in the long-term interest of Indian democracy. The main problem of Indian democracy is, as all of you know, it is corruption, political corruption. Then it has the intolerance, hatred, criminality. These are some of the things which have complicated the electoral scene. And you find that our parliament has more members who have had criminal record. And unfortunately, there are many exceptions. There is no doubt about that. But then the system provides for such people to enter the legislature. Be that as it may, a number of suggestions have already been made to bring about changes. But what are those changes which we can consider immediately without much of a problem? The immediate scene thrown up by COVID-19 is the need to maintain social distancing. So here is an opportunity. If we can avoid public meetings or political meetings, you know, so much enormous amount of money is spent by political parties, the candidates, to distribute money, to spend money on organizing meetings. And you find that they are all contributing to a confused scenario, because you really do not know whether an honest person can stand up in the election and win. There are ceilings on expenditure to be incurred by the candidate, but there's no ceiling for the political parties. That is the first drawback. The second drawback in our country is a lot of money spent in cash, which is not properly accounted for. So the political funding of the parties. Now, can we do something to ensure that there is an improvement in the light of the COVID district? If you reduce the number of political public meetings, the expenditure to a large extent will be reduced in the hands of the political parties. The political parties need to find out how a more honest set of people can be returned to the parliament. Now, Germany, they have a system of political funding based on the performance of political parties in the earlier election. This is a good idea. In fact, I have always been suggesting that it should not be a state funding of election as it is in Germany, but it can be a public funding of elections, in the sense the public will be allowed to contribute to a national election fund, which will be administered by the Election Commission under, of course, the various particular legislative provisions and conditions. The amount will be spent in consultation with all the political parties, but no political party will be allowed to spend money. The money that is given either in kind, the funding that is done by the public, either in kind or in cash, should be properly accounted for. So I'm sure with the guidance of all political parties, consulting them, we should be able to evolve a formula. Though there may be initial teething problems, we must switch on to the public funding of elections. The German system works very well because the political parties are mature enough to understand the implications of this. But our country, sometimes following the American system, we have spent enormous amount of money in the conduct of elections. Now, in America, there is no ceiling on expenditure, but the money is collected with the political party very transparently. Whereas here, in our country, the money is collected not so transparently. One of the things that recently they allowed is the electoral bond, which allows money, the source of which need not be asked for. This is not a very healthy sign. It is not a very transparent situation. So, using this opportunity of COVID-19, we should bring about the public funding of elections. The public, the corporations, and the individuals can donate to the National Election Fund, they should be given 100% tax exemption for the donations made, and the Election Commission will administer it. This is one method of checking proliferant spending of money during the elections. The second result, as I told you, there should be a ban on public meetings, or at best, you can have in each constituency only 2 or 3 public meetings. The rest of it should be should be done digitally. The public can participate. The political leaders can reach them electronically and explain their political ideology or their manifesto and so on. So that is one other advantage you have, because today you cannot have a public meeting in the context of the need for social distancing. So it is the best opportunity for us to bring about the change. In Mexico, for example, there is no public meeting at all for elections. All are done either by media or by posters, but there is no public meeting. But nobody will attend the public meeting. They are not interested in attending public meeting. In the border between Mexico and the US, there are some small public meetings that take place. So it is not legislatively banned, but it is not in vogue at all. So we should be possible. In a country like India, if you are going to allow public meetings to take place, apart from the financial aspect of it, the social aspect of hatred, violence, and so on can be avoided if we can have an electronically designed meeting for political parties. The second thing I would like to suggest is, in the case of but especially senior citizens, handicapped persons, diplomats and armed forces and uniformed people, they can be allowed easily internet voting. Internet voting has certain advantages. Of course, political parties will have their own objections, because there can be influenced voting by people at home when they do it by internet. But the educated class, such as the such as the diplomats, armed forces people, police services people, and senior citizens, they should be allowed the freedom to exercise their vote so that the crowding at the polling station is avoided. It is possible, it is not difficult to implement. It may be difficult to implement for all the citizens at one stroke, depending upon the experience that you gain from this limited internet voting. Later on, you can probably extend it to the other citizens. But as of now, my immediate suggestion is give internet voting to senior citizens, physically disabled people, armed forces, other uniformed people who are engaged in the election duty. Like, instead of going for a postal ballot, internet voting makes it simpler and easier. And also counting is easier in the internet voting. The third point I would like to mention is about the need for a separate law for political parties. Unlike many countries of the West and even other countries in Asia and Africa, we do not have a separate law for political parties. Now, you will be surprised to know there is no reference to political party in our constitution. Though our constitution is perhaps one of the longest written constitution in the world, there is no reference to political parties. Only to a schedule regarding Anti-Defection Act, there is a reference to a political party. So political parties, though an essentially important ingredient of a democracy and elections, they are not referred to at all in the constitution. So political parties in India, we have more than 1,000 registered with the Election Commission. Do they really participate in the election? Yeah, few of them do, but not more than 100 to 200. The remaining about 800 and odd political parties, they become lobbying societies, or they are used for some questionable practices. So I think it is necessary for us to introduce certain extraordinary conditions to ensure that political parties are not formed by whims and fancies of individual lobbying groups. In fact, this issue was taken up even earlier. It went up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said that the Indian citizen has a fundamental right to form an association. Yes, an association has certainly be formed, but it has to be subject to certain regulations and restrictions. So it is possible, with a proper design of a law on a political party, we should reduce the number of political parties in this country. The fourth point I would like to suggest is whether we can have a mobile polling stations in the light of the need for social distancing. Here again, I have a suggestion. The electoral identity cards are issued to most of the Indian citizens to partake in the elections. Now, if we can have some specially designed or colored election identity cards for senior citizens and physically disabled people, if you are not introducing internet voting, at least you can introduce mobile polling stations. In fact, Rajaji has suggested in one of his articles to consider whether we can have a mobile polling station. We encourage people to come and vote. Now, here again, of course, we have to clearly plan it well and organize this mobile polling station in such a manner that they are able to visit the important locations of the constituency so that there is no complaint. As of now, we have a polling station for every 4 kilometers. But then there are polling stations where we are not able to reach. There are voters for, even in Himachal Pradesh, we have a polling station for 1 voter. We have polling station in Sikkim, which is probably the tallest located polling station, where very few people come and vote. But then in such cases also, we can consider whether either mobile polling stations or internet voting. The other point I would like to say is that the ceiling on expenditure, I've already said that public funding of elections, should there be a ceiling on political party spending? In England, they have a ceiling on the expenditure incurred by the political parties, but we do not have. So while we have a ceiling for individual candidate, there's a large loophole where the political parties can spend the money. Only thing is they have to furnish a statement to the election commission on the amount spent by them. Now, there are a few other things which I thought I'll use this opportunity to provoke. Now, we have a very well-designed constitution where a lot of powers are given to the state and the center having more powers. Is it necessary or is it desirable to have an over-centralized central government or a state government? In many functioning democracies, it's worthwhile to delegate both financial and constitutional powers to the local self-governments. If we can delegate some of the powers, for example, whether a hospital is to be located in a particular constituency, or whether school or a college is to be located in a particular constituency, why should it go to the state government or to the headquarters or to the central government headquarters? Why should it not be delegated to the local self-government? Of course, it is necessary to strengthen the local self-government, not only with the powers, but with the organizational structure. So if we can delegate a lot of powers from the center, and the center's financial powers can be delegated to the local government, the state governments are also reluctant to give their powers to the local self-governments. So it is necessary to provide for the constitution an amendment to the effect that the local self-governments can raise resources, and it may have to be guaranteed by the government. For example, in one of the cities in Gujarat, Surat, they raised funds by issuing bonds, and they brought about a lot of changes within the city of Surat. The corporation was empowered to do that. So it is possible for us to think of decentralizing our powers, in which case it may be a real success for Panchayat Raj and the corporations to become more independent. In fact, the side effect of this is the people running to become a legislator in the state government and the center may get reduced, and the corruption at the central level or at the state level, particularly in getting certain favors done for a particular place or a particular locality, that will get reduced. So it is necessary for us to consider such a situation so that the powers are decentralized. Then the role of independence in elections. In Mexico, for example, the independents are not allowed to contest election for the parliament, though they are allowed to contest for the state legislatures. The independents don't come under the purview of anti-defection law, and they can create havoc, particularly if there is a slender majority between the ruling party and the opposition. So in my opinion, the candidates in the parliament should be subject to a party regulation, and they should not be left to be independent. It is all right if you want, we can give the power for the state legislatures, but certainly not for the state government. Though I would advise even for state legislatures, we should avoid having independence. We have a system called nota, that is where if you don't like any candidate contesting the election, you can vote for pressing the button relating to nota. That is none other than above. That is any other, the candidates listed above are not to be voted for, and you vote for nota. This was, of course, approved by the Supreme Court when I was in the chief election, in the election commission. And we supported this proposition in the interest of the political parties putting up better candidates so that they will know that the bad ones will not be voted and the votes will go to nota. A recent study by one of the students in Madras School of Economics has brought to my notice, of course, still in the initial stages. He has pointed out that the votes cast as a result of nota have not resulted in a major change as far as the candidates contesting for the election. Some of the votes have gone to the independents so much that they have not really benefited the candidates of other parties. So it is necessary for us to make a little more research on this subject, whether the nota should be encouraged and whether it is possible for a nota to be made more effective. For example, there is a situation, there is a condition in some countries, I think Mr. Peter also referred to it, there must be a minimum number of votes to be polled by a candidate winning the election. I have suggested earlier, at least the winning member should have 33 1/3% of votes polled in a particular election. Now, what happens today in India is because of the first past post system, a person can get elected even with one vote difference. In fact, it happened in Gulbarga. One person got out. He won the election because of one vote of one difference. So, in order to ensure that the constituency is represented at least by 33 1/3% voters, we must insist on changing the system. The first past system, in my opinion, has outlived its utility. It is all right at the beginning of independence. There were many voters who were not literate. Now I think the literacy rate has gone up very high. The civic awareness and the voter awareness has gone up. So in my opinion, it is necessary to bring the requirement that at least 33 1/3% vote should be polled by the winning person. There are also many other changes which I would certainly like to take and proceed with, but I have a feeling I'm running out of the time. And if there is an opportunity, I should certainly add on to these things. But here is an opportunity, as I mentioned, COVID-19 is an opportunity. The elections are around the corner. In South Korea, they conducted the elections in spite of COVID-19, and it was done very peacefully and very effectively. But I'm not sure whether we can do it the same way in a country like ours, where there is so much of population. Each constituency is large in size. Although the electronic voting machines have certainly improved the time taken for casting the vote and also to count the votes, it is probably necessary for us to think of some urgent changes so that the next few elections we are able to bring about an effective quality democracy. I think I'll stop here. I'll certainly intervene later with other suggestions as and when we proceed. May I say thank you very much for giving me an opportunity.
Sir, in fact, we have another 5-10 minutes. If you have something to share, you can go ahead, sir, because we'll start the Q&A at 6:45. Then still we have more than half an hour. So if you have some more points to share, you are most welcome to do that.
Okay. Then I will refer to one or two more things.
Yes, please. Sir.
Yeah. Yeah, there is also another requirement that the non-resident Indians, they are allowed to vote now, as per the amendment brought about in the Representation of People's Act. Now, they are required to come to the constituency. There is a proposal also now to give the proxy voting to them. Well, it is okay, proxy voting for the non-resident Indians is fine. I have no problem on that. And if it can be implemented effectively. But there is a proposal that whether we can have a separate constituency on non-resident, because as of now, the non-resident Indians have to exercise their vote in relation to that. In relation to a particular constituency, that residential address given in the passport determines in which constituency is named will be there. So in order to simplify the matter, whether it is worthwhile to consider a representative or 3 or 4 representatives representing a few continents, representing the non-resident Indians staying there. Then there is another point which I would like to refer to, is about the hatred and violence we have. We have a model code of conduct by which the political parties are expected to behave in a manner that they do not create any animosity between themselves. Unfortunately, this is one area where we have failed. The Election Commission has no legislative power to disqualify or debar a voter or even a candidate. I agree, there are limitations to that, because after all, we are only a constitutional body. But then there is a need for certain powers to be given to the Election Commission to ensure that if there is a hatred and violence, you must, like the football match, you can have probably a red card, then a yellow card, and then you have an orange card, and then a red card should be the one. The person should be disqualified. There is no point. For example, recently in one of the elections in Andhra Pradesh, one voter went into the polling station and broke the electronic voting machine, taking the point that it is not a reliable instrument of voting. I don't know. Almost all over the country, it has been very successfully launched and it has effectively worked, except for a few people who lose the election. They find it as an inconvenient excuse to put the blame on the electronic voting machine. But this person who broke the electronic voting machine, all that the Election Commission could do was to file an FIR against him. Now, if his own party comes to power, this FIR becomes meaningless, because the case will not be proceeded with, and I'm sure it will be closed without any problem. So in my opinion, there should be a power with the Election Commission to deal with the electoral irregularities practiced by political parties, practiced by candidates, practiced by voters. We can temporarily suspend the voting right for a particular election. Of course, it can be challenged in a court of law after the election. That's a different matter. But if you really want to bring discipline in the conduct of election, some of these changes are absolutely necessary. And if we cannot bring these changes with a kind of situation developing now, it will be very difficult for us to conduct fair and peaceful elections. Ultimately, the purpose is to ensure that we have a free and fair election. It is peaceful election. And most of our political parties, they do seem to be, to be very fair, or to understate the whole matter. They do not seem to be more responsible at all. They seem to think that they are a law unto themselves. They have so much of powers, particularly when they come to power, and then the meetings, etc., parliament meetings, etc. You find sometimes it's a farce of a democracy. Now, here again, I have a point to make. The parliamentary committee meetings, or the state legislature committee meetings, and the parliament meetings itself, is it part of it cannot be conducted by digital or electronic medium? If you go to the parliament, you will find hardly about 50 to 100 people attend the meeting, maximum. Only for the budget speech, you find a full house, or a joint session, you find a full house. When such is the case, we spend a lot of money on their buildings, on their residential accommodation, on their telephones, on their transport facility, and so on. Can we not reduce the election expenditure or the parliament expenditure by reducing this kind of meeting people in Delhi only? Is it not possible for the elected representatives to appear electronically and address the parliament? The ministers should certainly be available to hear them. There's no doubt about that. Probably the effective time of the parliament will improve if we can bring out electronic medium in the conduct of election, in the conduct of parliament proceedings. I think I'll stop here. I'll certainly take up other issues later.
Thank you so much, sir. You have really brought out so many issues. As you rightly mentioned, changes in the electoral process is a continuous thing, and there's so many changes are need to be done, especially when The country is going through a difficult time, and I think we have to follow. We got a number of questions from a lot of viewers watching the program live on YouTube, Facebook, as well as live IBC, and also on the chat mode. I will also share the questions what has come to me, and meanwhile I also request.
I thought Mr. Satyamurthy may like to say something.
Would you like to say something, Mr. Satyamurthy? Please go ahead.
Good evening, sir, and thank you. And thank you for the wonderful exposition of the election situation in the country, particularly in regard to COVID. Personally, I think, well, many of what you said need to be done. A lot more will be undone by our political system, parties, etc., etc. And you have got better experience and exposure to it than any of us here can. So, for instance, you have suggested online voting. At least in the coming elections, for the next 1 or 2 years, I am afraid, when we really need to have it during COVID, we may not be ready for it for a simple reason. We do not have reliable internet connectivity. Even as Group Captain Vijay Kumar knows, my participation in the discussion in all the events of which ORF is a partner with MMA online. This is the first time I am opening my mouth for a simple reason. I am not sure of my internet connectivity at any given point in time. So I think, practically, I think maybe mobile voting may be a possibility. 2, even otherwise, as you rightly pointed out, we have got 1 to 1.5 million voters per Lok Sabha constituency, and we have a full, say, 8 to 5 p.m. or 7:30 to 6 p.m. polling. Still, we have been able to poll only 67 or 70% at the best, and say in states like Tamil Nadu and Kerala, it has gone up to 75% in assembly election. So with COVID, particularly in the elections that are going to happen in the coming 6 months, how are we going to improve polling process on the voting day? Do we need more polling booths, polling staff than already, for a simple reason? If we are going to maintain social distancing, it is going to take its own time. Yes. So how are we going to face the immediate process? Holding that our government and our system may not be ready as yet for electronic voting of, online voting and other suggestions you made. And 2, when we can't secure the voting machines in the polling booth, as you rightly pointed out, how are we going to ensure the security of mobile voting? These are my start-up questions, sir.
Well, as far as
I'm asking practical. Yes.
do I answer now or do I answer later?
You go ahead, sir, so that afterwards I'll come to the audience questions. A lot of people, number of
as far as internet voting, I mentioned it only for a limited category of people. It is only for senior citizens, physically disabled persons. They have to be identified, they have to be given a proper identity. And I think it is workable. It is not difficult. I agree, if you want to introduce internet voting for all the voters, it is impossible. It is impossible in a short time. So in my opinion, it's worthwhile to start, see our teething difficulties, and then see what are the changes we have to bring about. As far as the mobile polling booths is concerned, I would like to mention that the same electronic voting machine will be used. It will not be a different machine, because all our electronic voting machines have solar batteries. So there is no need for depending on the conventional electricity. The second point is social distancing is possible to be maintained if we can maintain social distancing in restaurants, in shops, etc. It should be possible to maintain. And as far as the number of polling stations are concerned, we have designed it in such a manner that there is a polling booth for every 1,200 voters. Now, it is also designed in such a manner that if we all come over a reasonable period of time can be completed by 5 o'clock. But those who are within the queue, even after 5, can be included. If it is necessary, we may have to increase, depending upon the social distancing. We can increase the number of polling stations. Maybe in some places we can reduce the number of polling stations. The exercise has to be done, I agree with you. But I do not think a large-scale change will be required in this regard.
One more question, sir.
Sir, Satyamurthy, we have got quite a number of questions that come. Quickly, one question, please go ahead.
It is more as a concerned citizen. I want your answer rather than being a former CEC. In the first election that are going to happen later this year in the assemblies, to some assemblies, do you think because of the COVID fear, poll percentage will come down? To the extent that you said about 33% minimum.
In fact, I didn't mention about migrant labor. In states like Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, the number of voters is going to increase. And it's going to be a big challenge for the government to enlist all these voters, because most of them were not voting either in their home state or in the state where they were working, or some of them were working. So the voting register has to be perfected. But as far as voting percentage is concerned, I see no reason for a major departure, because after all, everybody is entitled to vote and will certainly vote. And those who do not want to vote, they will continue to abandon the polling station. But my own feeling is we will not have a big change either in reduction or increase, except in these 2 states where the migrant labor has there been a large input there.
Okay, go ahead, Captain.
Thank you so much, sir. The number of questions come. I will try and squeeze in as many questions as possible before we let you go, sir. Now, the first question is, as you said, in the Mexico, you mentioned that no public meeting is permitted because of pandemic, and it saved a lot of money, no doubt about it. And especially in a country like India, where I've seen people travel from one part to another, getting the aircraft, chartered the aircrafts, and so it will be a tremendous saving, not only the party's exchequer, also for the national economies. How do we enforce these rules in Indian conditions? How do you get a political consensus?
In Mexico, it is not statutorily banned, but I think it is all agreed by political parties that meetings do not serve a big purpose for them. So it may be that we have to call an all-party meeting and make them agree that except maybe in each constituency, if you want, they can have 1 or 2 or 3 meetings, but others should be only electronically done. So it is possible to arrive at a consensus if you can bring them together. And I don't think you can ban it statutorily, because people will say there is a right to express their views, there is a right to express a common association, and so on. So it has to be some kind of a consensus to be achieved. But I think in the context of COVID-19, many people will not be able to attend the meeting. So it may be the most attractive time to introduce it.
Excellent, sir. Now, one more thing which you mentioned, people have got a concern that independent should not be allowed to contest. I mean, it's one of the recommendations at the moment we have, because independent cannot be disqualified. They have defection, and quite a bit of thing happen in the case of majority is getting affected. Now, how do we bring in that such a rule in India? Because at times, independent of high quality who doesn't want to align themselves to any political party also want to join the process. How do we protect the interests of those people?
After all, it is a decision taken at the time when the constitution was formulated. There was no ban on the independence to contest elections. This is only to ensure a smooth functioning of the political system. I see no reason that it will not be an unconstitutional step to bring a law, because after all, the anti-defection law serves a purpose. If, for example, 2 or 3 independent legislators can cross over and topple the government, it is not a desirable thing. It's a public purpose for which you can certainly regulate and say the independents cannot contest elections. So constitutionally, there may not be any obstacle. That is my personal view.
Thank you, sir. In Bavaria and Germany, recently all postal voting mechanisms have been introduced, which completely excludes in-person voting in order to mitigate the health risk of contagions posed by the COVID-19. And also New Zealand also puts similar measures, which was quite successful. Do you think, is it possible in India to do, at least in certain metro cities, such a mechanism which could be introduced?
I have no hesitation in recommending that it is possible, but there are practical problems because, for example, there is a delay in the postal ballot coming. Then you have suppose within a particular time the result has to be announced. You can't keep the results pending. For example, in Indonesia, they take for a month to count and announce the elections. We announced it in 3 to 4 hours. So there may be practical difficulties, and if the postal ballot doesn't reach in time, and if there are any, impending obstacles reaching the place, etc. So when the internet facility is available with proper safeguards, if we can introduce it for those vulnerable sections of people who don't have to come to the polling station, I think the crowding in the polling stations also get reduced. So I would prefer internet voting to postal ballot. The postal ballot exists even now. Even the armed forces have been given the right to have a proxy voting. They can suggest one of the family members to exercise the vote on their behalf. These powers have been given. But my own personal experience is that postal ballots can create practical difficulties if you introduce it in a large scale.
So there's a question from Dr. Vasudevan, Institute of Analytics, USA. You want to know, can we have a system wherein any citizen of the country living in any part of the country is able to vote from wherever the citizen is for the candidate of his when he's not available in his constituency?
Well, it is practically not possible because in India, the voting is given on the basis of residence, not on the basis of citizenship. Now, if a citizen is entitled to vote, he can vote for any constituency. Here, the primary requirement, the voter should be a resident in that constituency. So he has to vote only for a particular constituency. For example, if we give internet voting for non-resident Indians residing in America, we may have to have an electronic voting machine for each constituency. And that is a problem. So it is, in fact, either the postal ballot or internet ballot is better, more practicable. So since we follow the principle of residence for the voting purposes, it will not be possible for an Indian citizen to vote from one place to another place. It's impossible. Unless and until we bring about a lot of changes, which in my opinion is not practicable.
Yes. So there's another question, sir. You are an advocate of state funding of political parties for elections. This idea is to end the electoral corruptions, what's happening. How can it be made to work in Indian conditions? And do you mean that the state funding would be adequate to meet the expenditure, what is expected for this?
Yeah, I'll tell you, if you give 100% tax exemption, many of the corporates at the moment, they donations to political parties, partly in cash and partly in legal methodology. And they have practical difficulties because they cannot announce or inform how much they have given to a particular political party, except what is paid by check or by the banking instrument. That is why they brought about these electoral bonds, which again, in my opinion, is an insult to transparency in elections. In fact, even if the donations in a particular election is less, the difference should be contributed by the state in the interim stage. But if you are going to give 100% tax exemption, at least within a period of 10 years, we'll be able to muster enough funds to conduct a parliamentary election with those funds.
Okay. I think, Mr. Peter, we'll come back to you after these questions. In fact, you have any questions, we'll be more than happy to.
Yeah.
So, there's a question from one Mr. Siddharth. Siddharth, what he wants to know is, will the social media be a new normal for the politics considering the COVID-19? How will electoral politics play during the upcoming elections, considering social distancing and the new normals?
Social media will definitely be a very important ingredient in the conduct of elections in the country. And it is very popular. But my only worry is it needs to be regulated. Unfortunately, social media is not regulated today. Of course, it is subject to certain guidelines given by the judgments of the courts. But we do not have a separate law. If we can have some kind of a monitoring authority and a regulation to that effect, social media will have to be used and channelized for constructive purposes to conduct elections. There is also a problem of paid news, as you know. There is a famous Ashok Chavan's case where the Supreme Court has held that a person can be disqualified if he has managed a paid news in his favor. So this paid news is also a very dangerous development in this country, and maybe in other countries it is also taking place, not very visibly well known. But This is again one area where we need to regulate. Social media as well as the paid media needs a lot of regulatory mechanisms.
Thank you. Mr. Peter, do you have any questions? Or shall we move on to the next question? Yes, Mr. Peter. You can unmute yourself, please.
I would have a comment. First, I like the idea of digital voting, let's call it like that, for a certain group of population. If you look at development, the email has replaced the physical letter. So why should that not be the case with the same idea of having the postal ballot being replaced or as an additional instrument by e-voting if the necessary safeguards are there? And for Digital India, it's one of the things they could pioneer and show where they can make progress and be in really an advanced position.
I agree with you.
I was thinking back, I served once as the Registrar General in preparing the elections in East Timor. And what I took from there was a lot I could use later too. In your experience, Zimbabwe was one of those where we not necessarily believe immediately that it was the greatest democracy. But anyway, there are elements you could take from that experience of other countries, other elections you could incorporate into India or in suggestion in general?
I agree. The experiences of other countries certainly provide opportunities for us to learn a few things. And also there are a few things which can be learned from India by other countries. There's no doubt about that. In fact, for example, in USA, every state has got a separate state election commission and they have got separate rules, a separate system of election. In one state, there is no need to go to polling station at all. In one state, you've got an electronic voting machine. In one state, it's a manual voting machine. There is a punching machine that is used and so on. But that may not be the right thing to have, but we can certainly learn how the political parties are regulated by these Western countries. That's one area where it's worthwhile to go and follow some of the examples. In Australia and Singapore, there is a compulsory voting. Now, that is again, we try to see whether something like that can be considered in India, but it's very difficult to introduce in India because in Australia, by nature, about 90% of the people vote. The number of absentees are less. But for example, with a voting system, even if you introduce compulsory voting in India, now if about 60 to 70% of the people come and vote, can we go and chase the remaining 30% for all their absence, whether we can look into their explanation, whether we should impose a penalty? 30% of the voters in India is a big number. And the election commission will be spending more time on that than conducting the elections. So these are practical difficulties. Maybe after 20, 30 years, it's a suggestion which could be considered. But internet voting, as I said right at the beginning, it cannot be introduced overnight for all the elections. We have to do it in phases. That's why I said take a category of people where they are vulnerable, where it will be useful to them, and at the same time, it will be helpful to the election commission. So we have to do it in phases. Some of the changes adopted in other countries, they are worthwhile. In fact, they are available with us, but they have to be introduced very carefully, considering the large size of the voting population in this country.
Good. Thank you, sir. I think next gen political leaders, one of the partners for the Prime Point Srinivas is there. In fact, if you have a question, keep it ready, sir. I will come back to you after requesting Mr. Krishnamurthy to respond to this question. So, shortened the period for poll campaign, coupled with delayed announcements of party candidates, has institutionalized the party and the symbol as a brand over the last 20 years or more, anytime in the past also. How can we rectify this flaw, sir? Because the party symbol has become more than the individual credibility. So how do we
I would like to compliment the person who has asked this question. In fact, it is one area where we have to do some rethinking. We take almost about more than 3 weeks for the election process, for nomination, for the withdrawal of the nomination and so on. It is one area, in fact, many people have suggested, but the scope for that is very limited. Maybe we can reduce it by about 4 or 5 days, not more than that, because certain procedures have to be followed. For example, we have to give them time to nominate name candidates, to file the nomination. We have to fill the various forms to be complied with. And it is possible to reduce maybe 3-4 days. But I would certainly say that conducting elections in too many phases is not desirable and we should reduce it. Now, for example, when I was in the election commission and when we conducted the 2004 elections, except Kashmir and UP, all the elections we conducted in less than 3 phases. In the last elections, you know that in West Bengal, they conducted it in 7 or 8 phases, which is, in my opinion, absolutely, it's not absurd, it is unjustifiable. It is necessary to conduct elections as far as possible in less than 3 phases. In Tamil Nadu, generally, we have been doing it in only 1 phase. In Karnataka, Kerala, Karnataka last time they did it in 2 phases, but when we were there, we did it only in 1 phase. So, as a part of this electoral reform, it is worthwhile to have a ceiling, except probably Jammu and Kashmir and 1 or 2 sensitive states. It is not difficult at all to reduce the number of phases. The election period can be certainly reduced. For example, in 2004, we took nearly about 5 weeks to complete the election process for all over the country. If we have enough central paramilitary forces, the election time can be reduced to maximum 2 or 3 weeks. So that is one area, yes, I think they can have more paramilitary forces and conduct the elections in less than 3 phases throughout the country except sensitive border areas.
Thank you, sir. Srinivasan, you represent the next gen political leaders. Do you have any serious questions for
Sir, good evening, sir, Mr. TSK. Good evening, sir, Mr. TSK. Sir, the recent talks about one nation, one election, that is to conduct an election of all states and parliament on a single day or a single time, single phase. Is it feasible? Because now, now during the COVID situation, now if there may be some states coming up for election, even if it is postponed, whether the other states will they agree? What do you feel about that? One nation and one election.
Theoretically, one nation, one election is indeed very attractive. It's worthwhile to consider. But then there are practical problems. Our constitution, rightly or wrongly, we have followed the Westminster style, whereby the government can be voted out anytime. Till, I think, 1962 elections, all the elections were conducted simultaneously, both for the state and the center. After post-1962, there were so many defections and so many fall of governments in the state government particularly. And even at the center, some prime ministers dissolved the house prior to the tenure period is over. It is not possible to conduct one nation, one election, unless the constitution is amended. The constitution should, I'll also indicate the area of amendment. It is possible to do it if you can say that a government cannot fall for want of confidence unless a new government is voted in power. For example, let us take parliament. We have about 543 members. If a party loses confidence of the house, initially when they had enough seats or enough power, more than the majority, but some of them may have defected or some of them might have been lost. Now, in such a case, if the political parties, opponent parties come together, they have to put up a candidate who will be the next prime minister. And if they can suggest an alternate form of government, the 5-year tenure can be continued. That means you will have to have a fixed tenure of the house. But if there is a fall of government, even following the Westminster system, we should ensure that the next alternative government is available to govern the country. If there is no such alternative available, the party which has been sworn in earlier will have to continue till the end of the term. If this amendment can be brought about, certainly it is possible to conduct the simultaneous election. But the transition period is very important. Even if you bring that amendment, can you bring it immediately? No, it is not possible because there are different tenures for different houses as of now today for the states particularly. So you may have to find a solution. Some of the elections have to be bunched during the transition period. And over a period of 3 to 4 years, you can bring together all the elections and have a simultaneous election. But most important requirement is to have a constitutional amendment.
Great insight, sir. Thank you, sir. So there's a question from one of our YouTube viewer. Sir, will you recommend total ban on social media once the elections are notified? Because the way the fake news influence the people, can it be done, sir?
No, it's very difficult to enforce it. It may be theoretically possible to maybe attractive, but to enforce it is very difficult because I'll tell you, sometimes innuendos will happen in social media. It will be hidden messages will be sent. And for example, I remember in 2004, one of the state legislative sections in Tamil Nadu, they brought some historical figures to drive home a point which particular party should be voted for or not. So that it is easy for people to, and Indians are quite intelligent in bringing messages in a very different form. And then the social media, it will be very difficult for you to ban it, but it is possible to regulate it, I'm sure about it.
Thank you, sir. There's a question from, again, a Facebook viewer. What he says, the previous chief election commissioners, including the station, done some phenomenal work in bringing reforms. And every time the station also reiterated some of the time, he says he's only implemented what has already been existing as a rules. If that is the case, what prevents the people who are at the power today to implement some of the fantastic suggestions what you recommended today?
Well, you see, the Election Commission is a constitutional body and has to act in accordance with the Constitution and the Representation of People's Act. These are I would say, the Bible to be followed by the Election Commission. And various rules and regulations are framed thereunder. Now, there is always a question that if Mr. Session could do so much, why not other chief election commissioners? In fact, I would say Mr. Session did a commendable work. He could bring many changes within the existing frame of law. But he had his own failings, some of which, of course, may not be known, but that doesn't matter. Now, the point is, the Election Commission has such a rich legacy, and the traditions carried on prior to Mr. Session. The first election was conducted, and the first chief election commissioner, I have the greatest sympathy and admiration for him, because there was a ballot box for each candidate in each constituency. What a mammoth effort it might have been. And he organized it in a short period of time, and there was no big opposition, so there was no big criticism, there was no big media to question these things. But then it was organized very efficiently by the first chief election commissioner. So over a period of time, things have changed. You cannot, what Mr. Session could do at that time, I cannot do it probably in 2020. There are difficulties, but because the media is very powerful. Secondly, the people have become more intolerant. In those days, when you have a certain rule or regulation, by and large, there is a reasonable amount of respect. The court decisions used to be respected, but it is not so now. So times have changed. So the Election Commission has certain problems, they have challenges, they have difficulties, they have also some wrong decisions. It is not that they are absolutely correct, and wrong decisions are taken. But I still believe that the Election Commission takes very quick decision than even the courts. Certain challenges, problems that we are brought to us within 3 days and 4 days, we take decision. No court in India can take such decisions because they will take their own time. So you have to appreciate the difficulties of the Election Commission. And the times have changed. But within the reasonable constraints that we have, I think the Election Commission has done a reasonable job, except on a few occasions. I can't say it is 100% perfect, but I would say reasonably good job has been done in the last few years. A few election announcements, etc., could have been, the controversies could have been avoided. But after all, it's a human institution. There are human aberrations going to be there.
Yes, sir. I think this Election Commission really deserves the accolade because this is considered one of the finest institutions, not only in India and around the world, sir. There's one question which is always vexing, is which really bothers some of the people. There's a high level of speculation in the media that EVMs are easily tampered. Since you have been there, can you tell me, because it'll create the confidence of many people who are watching this program live. What is it?
I have no hesitation. I repeat, I have no hesitation in saying that EVMs are a matter of national pride. These are innovated by Indian engineers in Electronic Corporation of India and Bharat Electronics, and they are manufactured under very, very strict and security instructions. There are inbuilt 10 to 15 security safeguards in the machine. And you will be surprised to know many countries, they have come and seen our machines and they have seen the robust nature of our machines. I do agree, because the easiest thing to blame in an election, if a person gets defeated, is to blame the electronic voting machine. And again, there are human errors like, machines have to be properly maintained. They have also to be properly used rather. For example, when a person goes to a voting booth, the first thing is after his identification is verified, the presiding officer put the switch on for the voter to go and exercise his vote in his cubicle. And then as soon as the voting is completed, it gets locked. The same voter cannot stand there and vote for another person. It gets locked. It is reactivated only when the next person comes. So my personal experience is EVM is a great blessing in disguise in this country. It is unfair to blame these machines. Two chief ministers took up this issue, one from Tamil Nadu and one from Punjab. They went up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court asked them to prove before them, taking the electronic voting machines of the Election Commission, how it can be manipulated. Both of them could not do it. The petitions were dismissed. Both of them came to power through electronic voting machines in the next elections. Thereafter, they never talk about the deficiency of electronic voting machines. So what has become a fashion today is to blame the voting machine. In fact, the voter verification trail that has been allowed now, so that the voter can see visually for whom he has voted, and then it can be counted as a check for, at least a test check for some of the polling stations. These are all safeguards introduced to please the voters, to bring about the confidence among the voters in the political parties. But in my opinion, it is very unfair to say that the electronic voting machines has failed in this country. Okay, let us assume that it has failed. In my opinion, it has not. It has done a reasonably good job. What is the alternative? The conventional ballot box. Do you know how much irregularities were conducted by political parties? Many states in the eastern area, they were putting bogus ballot papers in the boxes. So these are the other things we have to bear in mind. If you want to try to improve the electronic voting machine, bring some suggestions. For example, I had suggested the voting machine should indicate how many votes are polled every hour, so that you have a control over that. And there cannot be a bunching of votes at any point of time. So in my opinion, there is no need to doubt the integrity of the electronic voting machines. If you have some suggestions to improve the electronic, that experts can give suggestions. Certainly the Election Commission will welcome it. But do not opt for the alternative of ballot box voting, conventional ballot box voting. It is more dangerous.
Thank you, sir. I think it will put in tremendous amount of confidence the people who are watching this and also others who are involved in the democratic process of electing this. So there's a question, interesting question which has come from our YouTube viewer. Will you recommend directly elected presidential model for India? If so, how can we ensure that the checks and balances system works as efficiently as it works in US?
Well, the president, that means you are asking whether we can shift from presidential to parliamentary system of government to presidential system. There are arguments both for and against it. Now, if you think that a presidential form of government will improve matters, I'm afraid I don't agree with that view, because ultimately the human beings who adorn these offices, they matter. If the presidential candidate or the prime ministerial candidate, if we have a right leader, the system will work, whichever system we follow. But to say that presidential system is an improvement over the parliamentary system, theoretically is wrong, because any system will be effective depending upon the person who operates the system. So if we have a right man at the right job as the president, or the right man at the right job as the prime minister, the things will work. But don't blame the system of government, or don't opt for a system of government on the ground that it will improve matters. We need good leaders. That is more important.
Great insight, sir. We need good leaders. Very, very appropriate, sir. So there's a question from a Facebook viewer. He says, sir, you mentioned about proxy voting for NRIs. Is it not better to organize the voting through internet rather than proxies?
I prefer internet voting. I have no hesitation in supporting an internet voting for these categories: NRIs, the diplomats, the armed forces, physically disabled, and senior citizens. Give them the internet voting. Try it, how it works. Then in which case, if it works very well, because we have to build safeguards, because there is the unique identity number and it cannot be let known to other people. We should not allow political parties to barge into the house and force him to vote for a particular party and so on. These safeguards are necessary. But I think in a limited way, if we can introduce, see how it works, and get the confidence of the political parties and the people, then extend it to all the people.
Great, sir. So now there also so much issue came about migrant labor. So one of the people think now they understood how many migrant laborers are there around India from different states. How do we facilitate the migrant laborers to vote during the election time in their respective states?
But I think Election Commission has to do a massive job to ensure that these people who have come back to their home state, they are enlisted in the voter register. So they must bring some special measures. They may probably set up special booths and take a 1 month's time to ensure that all of them are given the registration and provide facilities for them, because many of them may not be familiar with the electronic system of registration, etc. So we may have to manually do it for these people, but it is possible. It's not difficult to do it. We may need about a month's time with massive, deployment of people to ensure that the voting is done. There can be irregularities. There can be, political parties can bring in bogus voters inside. So these things we have to provide rechecking, maybe some peer checking by, sample checking of these registers and ensure that there are less deficiencies in the voting register. But it is going to be a major challenge to the Election Commission, and I'm sure it is capable of facing it.
Thank you, sir. We got another 5 minutes. I'll try and squeeze in as many questions as possible. There's a lot of interesting questions that come from different sources.
Group Captain, can I ask one?
Yes, please. Go ahead, Pankaj.
You ask also your tech team to unlock my video, please. They have kept me locked out every time they do something or the other. Anyways,
hey, Shankar, why can you unlock the video of Pankaj, please?
No, sir. Just a minute, sir.
What happened?
Sir, he will start the videos. Yeah, that's opening, sir.
so,
you put him as
Mr.
host.
Krishnamurthy, it has been a pleasure listening to you and how you have kept up to date with all the elections happening all over the world. Now, you would agree that elections as a tool for having a vibrant democracy is a critical tool for that, right? So how do you feel? I'm just asking you as a person who has conducted elections in India for so many years. When, for example, in the recent state election in Maharashtra, the pre-election coalition up to form a government of convenience and join the opposition. You know what I mean? Shiv Sena BJP fought election together on one platform, and then after election, the Shiv Sena shifted. So I said that's basically a travesty in the sense that they have fooled the voters.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. There is no doubt that the pre-election alliance has been given a go by, and then for interests of their own power, people have different alliances. In fact, in my book, which I have written, The Miracle of Democracy, I have mentioned that there should be a legally pre-arranged alliance. It should not be allowed to be broken. And if that is broken, the fresh election should be held. There is no justification for one party to move to the pre-election alliance to join another party just for their own personal convenience or personal reasons. I think the people have really been fooled in that election. I have no doubts about it. And it's very unfortunate that we have no legal mechanism to question it. So there may be a need for an amendment in law that a pre-arranged alliance between parties will have to continue after the election. If it cannot continue, then a re-election should be held.
So this is an interesting question. Pankaj, would you like to add anything more to add, or?
No, thanks. No,
thank you, Pankaj. So there's a question again from the Facebook. What do you want to know what's your views on enacting a law, right to recalls? With some of the governments have so failed miserably during the pandemic, how can we enforce the right to recall?
Well, I support the idea of a right to recall, not because you are going to recall anybody, but at least it will bring in some discipline among the legislators that they may be recalled. See, in Switzerland it is there, in Canada it is there, in a few other countries it is there. But then we have to have a minimum number of voters to initiate a recall measure. Maybe in those countries it's about 50,000 or whatever it is, but we may have to have a larger number. And then collect all the voters and then to implement it. Theoretically, it's a very attractive proposition, and I think we should consider, even if it is not going to be invoked by any constituency, by any voters, I sincerely believe it will bring in some discipline among our legislators.
Okay, sir. I will go request you for two more last questions, sir, which are quite interesting questions. Though so many of them have come. So do you think the electoral bonds as they exist now is transparent and accountable?
It's a fraud on the people of India, in my opinion. I have made this public in many of my TV interviews. It is not at all transparent. If you really want political parties to behave responsibly, this is one area where we must immediately amend the law and see that this is banned. It gives an opportunity for black money to be diverted into the political system. Though it was argued that the money comes through a banking system, but the source is still black money. And I will not approve of this at all.
Thank you for a candid response, sir. There's another question again from our YouTube viewer. One nation, one election. How can you have a 5-year legislative when with an anti-defection law, sir? That one nation, one election will be a really problem when anti-defection law is enforced.
No, the anti-defection law comes into question when a party member leaves one party and joins another party, or a group of legislators want to join another party. As far as one nation, one election is concerned, the most important requirement for that is a fixed tenure of the House. The House cannot be dissolved prior to the tenure period. Now, even with the fixed tenure, there can be defections. Some party members can move to another party, but they have to elect a new leader, and that leader has to command the confidence of the House. So there is no contradiction between anti-defection law and a fixed tenure. So there can be defections. Genuine defections can also take place for a person leaving one party and another. But we ensure that the legislature is not dissolved just because of this defection. So that once the legislature is not dissolved because of defection, the resort to defection will be very little or very few, and maybe very genuine ones alone will take place, not the bogus ones.
There's a question from Dr. Gopal. He's a professor, Department of Computer Science from Engineering College, Gindi. What do you want to pre-election, post-election alignment during usually indicate that an ideology or personal differences emerge, which clearly brings you not pragmatic for them to fight it, continue together. Why should we object to this? Leave and let leave.
Let them leave, but what I'm saying is go for the election again. That's all. I mean, if you want to break the alliance and then come out, okay, but go for the next new election. You cannot fool the people, because you have given a certain amount of promises to the people jointly, and then you suddenly leave a particular alliance. I'm not going into which party is right or which party is wrong. The point is the people have been fooled in this process, and they say that we'll have a common minimum program and we'll run the government, etc. But that is not true democracy. You are supposed to represent the will of the people. In fact, this is where I quote Edmund Burke. He says the famous quotation he tells to the voters of Bristol. He says, elect such representatives who vote for local interest. They safeguard the local interest. But if there is a conflict between national interest and local interest, the representatives you elect should be the people who opt for national interest and not for local interest. So the defections will all continue. I have no problem on that, but we have to ensure that the promises made to the people are honored, and they should not look like fools in the ultimate process.
Yes, thank you, sir. One last question for the evening, sir. The COVID crisis has shown that states with effective Panchayat Raj systems like Kerala and to the extent Karnataka have fared extremely well. But most other states have not granted enough power to the local bodies under the constitutions.
Yeah, I made this point earlier.
Yes.
I think ultimately, if democracy has to survive and succeed in this country, it cannot be a centralized system of government either at the center or the states. Each district or each constituency or each corporation and each panchayat should have enough powers to raise resources so that the strain on the central government is also less, the scope for corruption is less. So we have to decentralize both political powers as well as financial powers to the local self-governments. And it is, even if you concede this point, it may take a few years to implement it, but the sooner it is done, the better it is for improving the quality of democracy in this country.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. You've been so kind enough to allot so much of your time to respond to all the questions patiently and share your insight on what reforms. I think if we go through the reforms, some of them which you recommended, I think our democratic process system will be very, very good, because the number of questions that come together, many of them are asked on freebies and the bribes and election, which you are all vexed. You know that you in your speech you do mention how some of the things to be curtailed, which you need a political will. Thank you so much, sir. And I also thank more than 1,300 viewers who watched this program from YouTube.
Thank you,
Facebook.
Captain. You have organized it very well, and I must say it's a most enjoyable experience to me. Although I feel it's sometimes frustrated to talk about electoral reforms which have been on paper for a long time, at least it gives the satisfaction that there are people still interested in the subject. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks to Pankaj. He's the one who suggested we should have a topic on electoral reforms. Pankaj, I think your suggestion is good. Keep suggesting. We'll try and do as much as possible. Thanks to our partners for this event, ORM Satyamurthy, Prime Point Srinivasan, the next gen political leaders, and also Conrad Stifting, who have been a great supporter of us during this time where we have been organizing, able to bring some outstanding speakers with Peter Rimley and Pankaj and the team from CAS have been great support. Once again, viewers, it's a great encouragement. You are coming in such a big number and watching our program. Keep watching. I also mentioned to you what are the other programs coming up. Next program, see you on the 6th. Thank you so much, each one of you. As a token of appreciation, may I request to all the people who are viewing this and who are not unmuted, request you to clap, and all others, you can put your thumbs up in your chat mode. Thank you so much, and it's been a great evening with you, sir. It's really a pleasure. I will walk miles to listen to you every time you speak on electoral reforms.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pankaj. Thanks, Mr. Peter. Bye-bye. Thank you, Mr. Satyamurthy.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good night till we meet again. Stay safe. I think always I'll tell them, stay safe and keep following the rules so that it makes...
If we can have such a nice meeting, why not our parliament also can function like this with social distancing and on electronically? Most of the discussions can take place with some kind of harmony, political harmony, and decisions are taken in quick time. Thank you.
I wish let the parliament be a great takeaway from MMA. I think we'll be privileged and honored, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate your kind words, and it means a lot to us. Thank you so much, and good night, ladies and gentlemen, for sharing this evening. Till we meet again, bye-bye. Take care, stay healthy, and stay safe. And keep learning. That's one of the reasons you must log into MMA programs, and I can assure you will keep learning. Bye-bye, and good night.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Shankar. Bye-bye.